All right. So today is Monday, June 9th, 2025. I am the interviewer, Amy Moritz, with Sally Coos in the Murphy Building on the campus of St. Bonaventure University. Sally graduated from Sweet Home High School, where she played field hockey, basketball, and softball. She returned to her alma mater, serving as the girls' volleyball coach from 1974 to 1996. Sally and her Sweet Home team set the National High School Federation record for consecutive wins with 292. During her tenure, she compiled a 794-29 record with 6 straight New York State titles from 1990 to 1995, along with 21 straight ECIC League Championship Titles, 20 straight Section 6 championships, and 15 consecutive Far West Regional Championships. She went on to coach Daemen College, then an NAIA school, for 4 seasons before coaching 3 seasons at the University at Buffalo. She's a member of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame and numerous others that I can't even begin to count. Sally, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Thank you. It's great being here.
I love it. So if you could start, tell me a moment that you first remember falling in love with sports.
Oh, it's got to be my brother. I was always following him. He'd go to the playground, and I could play with the boys because for a while I almost thought I was a boy. You know, I wanted to play sports, and that was the only place I could go. I couldn't wait to go to high school, but in junior high, I got to play intramurals. And intramurals meant we formed teams in our school, but we just played against each other after school, but at least it was a place to play. In high school, we had field hockey and basketball first, added softball, and I finally got to play the sport I love and wear a uniform and represent my school and just have so much fun.
So it sounds like most of your introduction was through your brother, right? And
yes.
Just playing park, pickup, is that basically?
Wiffle ball, anything I could get in on. And, I got chosen on teams, so my brother didn't mind. I tagged along with him.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, were there other girls playing around that time too, or was it mostly just you? Playing
it was
with
me.
Yeah. Was that pretty much your only opportunity besides when you got into school and could start with the intramurals?
I got to be a bat girl on my brother's little league team. And it's funny, I look back now and I don't know why I didn't think it was odd that I didn't have a team to play for. I was thrilled to be a bat girl. But why didn't I look back as a little girl not realizing I had no opportunities?
You just know what you know, I guess.
Right? Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So when you then go to Sweet Home to high school, you said putting on that uniform and kind of being able to play. First, it was just field hockey and basketball. Right? Tell me about what those teams were like. Who did you play? What was that competition like?
I look back and I felt like we were in the Olympics, just because it was my first time to really play. I still have my very first uniform. It's pretty ugly, but it's still mine and I'll never give it up. It was just, it was so exciting, except we had trouble getting the gym for practices. It was the boys' teams. If the boys' team were away, then we got to practice. Luckily, field hockey and softball, we had no conflicts. So it was just so much fun. And
when did you mention softball came along?
Yes.
Talk about adding softball there.
Oh my gosh. We kept bugging Mr. Robert Barzak, who is our athletic director extraordinaire. And he goes, well, I could get Ken Maurice to play against you. He goes, but I don't know if there's any other places to play against. We didn't care. Then he came back and said, well, I don't really have a coach. And we said, would you coach? And he did. And it was just great. I only got to play 1 year because that was the first year they started it. But Kenmore East was just as excited as we were.
Was it, how long, I guess, did it take a long time? How long were you bugging him to try to get a softball team?
Probably 3 years. Yeah. And he was a real booster of girls' sports. He had 3 daughters, but more than that, he was just a booster of sports. He wasn't like the good old boys. He really felt, and he was a big progressive pusher for girls' sports at Sweet Home.
And so it was Ken East, you said, right?
We played against Ken East. That just happened to be where his daughters went to school. Yeah.
Helpful, right?
I know, it was very good.
At that time.
Yeah. He had a daughter that was very good, so it was great.
So then you go to the University of Akron, right, for phys ed, right?
Correct.
So what was the decision? How did you end up at Akron?
Well, I wanted to play basketball in college because that was a sport that was pretty widely accepted in more programs than anything else. So I applied. I knew Akron, Bowling Green, and Toledo had teams. Talked to their coaches, went on, visits and everything. Not like they do now, but just, hello, coach, one of those. And I ended up choosing Akron because it was closest to home. And it wasn't so much because I felt I was going to miss home, but I knew my dad would miss my games. And he was at every home game, anything he could get to. He'd take a half day off from work and come see me play. So I know I made the right decision.
What did that mean to you to have your dad be so supportive like that?
Everything. He was so proud of my brother. He was a big-time athlete at Sweet Home. And when I came along, it was just another opportunity. He was always helping at Sweet Home, taking stats for football, basketball, baseball. So after my brother graduated, I was left, and he was thrilled to follow me.
And physical education, what made you decide that that was the field you wanted to go into?
Well, when I was a younger girl, I wanted to be a flight attendant, get to fly around and everything. But as soon as I went to the senior high school at Sweet Home, I had a physical education teacher named Joanne Hampshire. Oh my gosh, she was everything I wanted to be. I wanted to be with her all the time. She developed relationships with all the kids, and we just wanted to hang out with her, no matter what it was. I would skip physics class to go down and hang out in the gym.
And it also was a way for you to take your love of athletics,
Yes.
right, and
Oh,
turn that
definitely.
into some sort of a career.
Right. I didn't realize what a physical education teacher does, though. I got to play sports. Another avenue for me. Yoo-hoo, When I first started teaching, and I think the whole first year I just played with the kids. I don't remember teaching anything. The second year was a girl asked me how to do a layup in basketball, and I was like, oh, okay. So I taught her how to do it, and I kind of got this warm, tingly feeling in my heart, and I went, I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So after that, that was it.
That was, yeah. So you go to Akron. First of all, what was the experience like playing at basketball at Akron at that time?
It was a step up from high school, but it was still, there was a big, huge arena, and there was a little back gym, and that's where we practiced. We did get to play in the big gym, though, and we played, large schools like Ohio State and OU and all the other schools, because there really wasn't Division I. It was called
AIAW?
That's it, right there. And so not a lot of rules, but again, I got to play. And I got to play with talented kids, and I learned to play defense. I was kind of a shooter, and I was,
At some point, the coach is like, let's play some defense.
Yeah, that's right.
So after Akron, did you go right to Sweet Home from Akron back to Sweet Home?
Yes, I was student teaching. I was a senior at Akron. I took a day off to have some interviews around Buffalo, and they were all pretty good. But I didn't think I couldn't decide which one of the 5 schools I should accept, because back then you had an offer everywhere. And my dad asked me after dinner to run up and get him some ice cream at the store. And I ran into Mr. Barzak. And he goes, I'm not talking to you. And I said, why? And he goes, you put my name down for a reference, but you don't apply to Sweet Home. I said, I did too apply to Sweet Home. He goes, who'd you send the application to? And I said, Jack McMahon. He's the personnel director. And he goes, you send it to me. And I go, oh, I didn't say that. He goes, do you want a job? And I said, yeah. And he goes, you got one. So going up to the store to get ice cream, that's how I got my job at Sweet Home.
That's one of the best job origin stories
Yes.
I've ever heard.
After sitting through a day of interviewing, it was like, Oh, if I only knew it was ice cream, you know.
If you only knew that how easy that would have been.
Exactly.
So hired as a phys ed teacher,
Right.
And then were you coaching right away?
No, I wanted to coach basketball. I just had that in my mind, and it wasn't open, and I was at the middle school. So I felt I should really give back to those kids. So I really did a lot of intramurals, and they had what was called extramural teams. So we took the best from intramurals and played area teams after school. It was a little bit of competition. It was step up from what I had, and it was a great opportunity. But then Bob Barzak, he's my idol, came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm in a bind. Would you coach volleyball for me next year?" And I said, "Oh, volleyball, what a dumb sport that is. You get 3 hits and everybody just bangs it over in the first hit." And he goes, No, I just need it for a year." I go, "No, I want to coach basketball." And he goes, "Okay, I will hire you as the next basketball coach if you will take volleyball for me this year." So I said, "Okay," so I coached volleyball the first year, and the kids knew way more than I did. They were a very talented team, one of the best I ever had, very athletic. And I look back at my practices now, and they were kind of a joke, but the kids taught me a lot. And we came in second in the league, which I thought was pretty good, but I think there was only 5 teams in it. But he came up to me and he goes, "Would you coach for me next year?" And I said, "No, that was embarrassing. The kids knew more than I did." He goes, "I'll send you to a clinic." I said, "Okay." So I went to a clinic in Rochester. And when I came out of that weekend, I felt I was ready to coach the Olympics. You just don't know what you don't know till you learn something. It was amazing. So the next year we came in first. And it wasn't all me. Again, I had a really great team. But I learned from that you got to learn something every year, because I look back, oh man, if I only knew that last year, we'd have been so much better. And that was kind of my goal. Every year, learn more. And that's kind of how I got to coach volleyball. And then when basketball opened, I didn't even want it. So
you fell in love with volleyball pretty quickly.
I did. I think I fell in love with it because I didn't know anything about it. When I coached basketball modified, I had trouble with it because I knew the sport and I couldn't figure out why the kids just couldn't grab onto it. But in volleyball, I was learning with them. And so I really had to break down the skills and learn how to coach from their mistakes instead of just see the end result and coach from there. It just gave me so much in coaching knowledge.
That's really something, because so many people think that, well, you have to have played the sport in order to coach it. But if you know how to teach and you're humble and want and learn that and know athletics in general, it sounds like that's kind of what you were able to build your success on.
Yeah, I really look at humility as being a key. A little bit of success could have made my head really big, and instead I kept seeing better schools and better teams and strive to be like them. But until you get there, you can't even think about having a big head. And that was one of the things I really try to pass on to my kids. You get interviewed, you write something about your team, you talk about your team. This is a true team sport. This is an individual. So you better give credit to your teammates because you're getting the credit for the interview.
Yeah. What was it? So at that time, and I'm going to back up. It sounds like even from when you were there was a really supportive culture for girls who wanted to play sports.
Very much so.
And I guess, can you describe that then as you're coaching? Because sometimes on the other side, you see how the sausage is made a little bit on that side, right?
Definitely.
So, but what did you notice about the support for girls in that culture there?
I think it was just so new, and no one knew how to handle it. We needed more gym space. It wasn't just about when the boys were away, could we get the gym? We were, in a conference now. So we were supposed to get equal time. Now, we kind of had to go in the back gym instead of the front gym, which was called the boys' gym. and the back gym was the girls' gym. But as time went on, they bent over backwards to try and make things equal. And I'm not going to say the good old boys were happy with it, but I think when we brought success just in sports, it just lifted the whole sports program. In the beginning, when we only had, we had 4 sports and we had 1 uniform shirt, and it was a bright gold. It was Banlon. It was baggy. And after everyone wore them for a couple years, it was about pea green, And so as Title IX rolled on in the 70s, all of a sudden we started getting uniforms. Oh, my goodness. Now, we didn't have the warm-ups yet, but, let's not go too far. And it's funny because that reminds me of a story when I was at UB. There was a girl who gave a speech at the Girls and Women's Sports Day, and she had been involved at UB through Division III, 2, and 1. And she goes, when we were Division III, we were so appreciative. Thank you for giving us that. This is wonderful. We can't wait to represent you. When they went Division II, they said, this is pretty nice. What else are you going to give us? And when they went Division I, she said, everyone just said, what are you going to give us? So, I always felt it was so important to stay appreciative. And, I didn't, we deserved it, but I still felt we should be thankful and do the good things and not, and not just think we should have them, just appreciate what we were getting. So the culture turned around. It took us about 10 years, but it got so, it was pretty equal at Sweet Home.
Yeah, and it sounds like with Bob, you had some really good advocates too.
Oh, yes.
Within that, like you said, Bob was one of the good old boys, but was someone that spoke their language maybe and could help.
Definitely, and he knew Title IX. We had a great Board of Education and administration. Without that, you can have an advocator, but you're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And Bob was so respected in the state.
Tell me a little bit about those teams at Sweet Home. So we get into the when did you first think you had something special? I mean, I know that you won the league that second year, but was there a point where you're like, we got something going here?
Well, I've been asked many times, what's your recipe for a successful program? And I thought, oh my gosh, I had to look back and think, I didn't know anything ahead of time. It just kind of started. But if I had to think back, I guess I would think a good feeder program, good physical education, intramurals, that whole bit. And try and give, I always felt that trying to give the kids something they didn't have in other sports. We went to tournaments. We hosted a tournament. We did fundraisers together. We had a stand up at Buffalo Bills Stadium. And we just developed such good rapport with each other that the kids would do anything for volleyball. And I had to remember that they were most of them 3 or 4 sport athletes and be fair. But I think giving kids something that they didn't have was really key when we first started. And my first game was a loss. And I thought it just showed it. I knew I had to be humble. And that was my thought. I have to always think I have something to learn, because I do, and the kids do. So, but then we started winning, and it was almost got kind of scary because, we'd walk in and people would look at us with Sweet Home on. It was like we had points in our pocket. The more you win, the more you win, the more you win. And some people would look at us as, oh my gosh, I hope we can get 3 or 4 points. And some people would say, we put our shorts on the same way they do. So it depended on, the history and the culture of the other teams we were playing too, how we were, looked at.
As you were talking, I was going to ask you what, as you were having the success, how other programs responded to you and your success. I mean, obviously you win, you're going to have a bullseye on your back because
right.
That's what you are when you're in first place.
Right.
But it sounds like it was a very different depending upon who you're playing.
Definitely who we were playing. And just recently, I had to give blood for something, and the lady goes, Cuz you're the Sweet Home coach? And I went, yeah. She goes, oh my gosh. She goes, I played for Kenmore West. We played against you. We always try to get in double figures. And I said, how did you look at us? She goes, competitively. We just wanted to do better against you. She goes, the highlight of my whole life was I blocked Lenore Davis. And that's all. I never forget. Now, this lady is like 40, and she remembers a 16-year-old's name who was a phenomenal player, but she still remembered it. Yeah, other teams, because I tried to keep my kids humble when we went through the line and congratulate them, they were quiet, but they'd say, nice this or nice that. But a lot of times people thought we were stuck up because we didn't go too crazy or anything. But when people got to know us, they really liked us. We had played a team that wasn't very good. And afterwards, I said something to the coach. I said, I knew she didn't like me. And I said, do you want us to, want to come to one of our practices? We'll give your kids a clinic. She was like, what? I said, yeah, it would be fun. We get to know your kids better and, we'll try and help you out. Oh my gosh, that was it. I was like her hero. And really, I honestly meant it, just to try and help her out. But it was tough with a lot of schools. It was a love-hate relationship.
Do you feel that with the success for Sweet Home, that helped raise other people's level, help raise the girls' game in Western New York because you were having that success and now everyone wants to beat you, dethrone you?
Yes. In fact, we had a 32-team tournament, which was single elimination. I didn't think it was a smart tournament, but everybody wanted to go to the Sweet Home tournament. So I had to have all these, we had 5 courts we could put up, but, we didn't have enough for any more. And the people would always say to me, I love coming to this tournament, but I'd like to play more. And I said, well, we could eliminate half the teams and we could play double. Well, I don't want to be eliminated. This is like aerobic volleyball. We get to see the new fashions. We get to see how everybody plays. So, yeah, I can remember we were the first ones to wear the bun huggers shorts. Oh, well, some people thought they were so bad. I had one mother from another school come up to me and say, how can you let your kids wear those? And I looked over and I said, oh, yeah, your team has dolphin shorts on. I said, call your daughter over for a minute. So she came over, and I had one of my kids come out, and they both turned around. I said, touch your toes. Well, nothing showed for my players because they were sticky, bun huggers. And the other girl, not too good. So, but people we copied the best. We looked to see what, Michigan Elite played or the Olympic team was wearing, and we tried to copy it. And it was great because Mr. Barzak always wanted us to look sharp all the time. Before we went to playoffs, he might buy us a new shirt or something like that, just to spark us.
When we're on that midst of that long, what was it?
The streak.
290, the streak. What was that like? I mean, at a certain point, what is that like? And I even remember media attention around that, which you probably didn't have to deal with as much beforehand, right? So what was that as you're approaching that?
Yeah, it's amazing because USA Today had come out and ranked us number 1. Sports Illustrated, they were contacting us, and I was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. And Bob Barzak came down to the middle school where I taught, and he goes, you're going to have the day off. We got the big game today, and we're going to have to set up the gym. And I'm thinking, for a game? I didn't know what he was talking about. And it was past, like the firemen would have been pretty upset with us because we had way too many people in there. But just running out to a crowd like that was unbelievable. But I think one of the hardest things with the streak was none of the teams wanted to be the team to lose. And so once a year, I talk to the kids and say, listen, we're going to play either a better team or we're going to have a bad day and they're going to have a good day. And it's going to happen. And to me, it's important the way you handle it, especially out on the court. I don't want you to blame the referees. I don't want you to blame anybody else. I just want you to shake hands. I want you to go up to the referee and shake their hands and tell them nice game. And when you get in the locker room, you can cry all you want. I said, and this is all we're going to talk about it. And when it happened, it was so funny because the referees were crying. The other coach was crying. And it was Horseheads. They were a very good team. And when I went in the locker room, the seniors were hysterical. The juniors were crying. The sophomores were consoling the seniors, and the freshmen were like, "We just lost the game. What's the big deal?" You know. So it was really how to handle one loss, and I didn't realize that for 2 weeks we almost just kept losing. The kids were like depressed. They had lost. It was like being at a funeral at our games. And so Bob and I decided we had to do something about it. So he said, let's have a funeral for the streak. And I said, okay. So the art department made us a casket, and somebody went inside the casket like a Horsehead player with volleyballs. And then our players were out on the court, and there was also somebody else like being a horse. And we had it at a pep assembly, so the whole school was there. And when the coffin came in, which was the death of the streak, they played taps, the whole thing, and everybody was booing the horse and everything like this. And all of a sudden, the Sweet Home cheerleaders started cheering, and they started singing our pep song. And out of the casket burst a panther with volleyballs and started spiking them at the horses, and they rolled over and died, and everybody was happy. And it did it. It was like being at a funeral, but we were still alive. So that was how the death of the streak finished, and we lived through it. The only problem was I was so concerned with the other kids, I forgot how I felt. And I did miss it. I think I missed it because it was such a notoriety for us. But then the news started saying, okay, let's start again. Oh, you won one. Here's two. Here's three. And I was like, no, please don't count again.
We don't necessarily need to count all over again. That's really interesting that how much you had to kind of prepare them for the eventuality of that after you set, because you set the record was before the 292.
Right.
But at some point you're going to lose a game.
That's
and
right.
So it's how do you manage that with teenage girls who
Right.
there's a lot going on there too.
Right. And it was always a scare that, if the score got close, am I going to sub? Am I going to sub because somebody's screwing up, or am I going to sub just because I want to play other players? And it was always in the back of your mind, I don't want to be the reason, and I don't want a kid to be the reason for the streak to end. The kids were just so proud of it. The school was so proud of it. And it's funny, when we did get in the game and we had split, they won the first game. We did win the second game. The third game, they were ahead of us. And I'm almost ashamed to say I was already thinking of what to say as interview answers instead of concentrating more on my team. We were all scared at that point. And we had been close to that point before, but because we'd already always stayed into the game, we were fine. And that was it. But the best thing of losing the streak was 2 weeks later, we played Horseheads in their tournament and beat them. And it taught us, our kids, what a revenge win is like. Because there's nothing better than a revenge win.
Was there a certain relief when the streak ended then? I mean, not that you were happy about it, but did it take some of that angst away?
There was less tension. But like I said, the attention from us was dwindling. And we loved it. As much as I say we stayed humble through it, felt real good inside.
Mm-hmm. And what, like you had mentioned, USA Today and
Yeah.
Sports Illustrated. What was that media attention like? You had national media attention,
Right.
and then were you also getting the local media attention too?
We were. At that point, it was the mid-'80s, and the news and TV, they were all into us. They were all into girls' sports. Things are pretty even by then. So I thought they represented us well.
You had mentioned a good feeder program like before.
Right.
This is you're coaching before the AAU and explosion and
Right.
and all of that. So I'm just wondering what during your career did you see that change? I know you were coaching multi-sport athletes.
Right.
During your time, were girls starting to specialize more in volleyball, and how were those outside programs maybe impacting the club programs or AAU programs starting to impact the high school program?
We formed Cheetah Volleyball Club, and there really wasn't a lot of. It was AAU basketball, but very little volleyball around. So people were very eager to get in our club because playing a year of club adds a year of another year of what how you can play, of experience. So at first we were really large because we were trying to service all of Western New York. Well, then a few other clubs opened up, which kind of helped us, and we became more of an elite program. I can remember one girl said to me, "I just strive to be a cheetah. I'm playing someplace else, but I'll always try out because I strive to be a cheetah." And I was like, "Woo, this is pretty good." I would say club volleyball did the most. Now I would say it's club and beach volleyball.
Okay.
So, we didn't have beach back then. We thought Lake Erie was just, we didn't realize you could dig a hole and make a beach in your backyard,
You weren't doing that,
That's right.
right? Yeah. So in addition to, kind of club comes around, but you also were the coach for volleyball, the Empire State Games.
Oh, I loved them.
How important, so tell me about your experience there and how important were Empire State Games especially for high school girls?
Well, what was important for Empire State Games were they started in the late 70s, and clubs really, we didn't start Cheetah till 79. So Empire State Games gave us another platform for competitive. And the thing is, it was like 6 regions across New York State, and they were the best kids. So you played every region, and you got to know other kids and see how they played. But it was definitely a step up from high school. And at the time, it was a step up even from club when they first started. And a lot of college coaches came and scouted them. We really didn't have the kids that long to train them, but they were the best. They just had to be able to fit into an offensive and a defensive scheme together. It was just a great situation for girls.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the college coaches in
Mm-hmm.
volleyball. Was there a lot of recruiting at that point going on at Empires, or?
There was from area states. Nobody was flying across the country, but it was another opportunity because it was very confusing how to get a scholarship. In the beginning, it was send tapes, Super 8s. I don't know if anyone remembers those. You could go to a school and try out. I had my first scholarship. The girl tried out her first day of freshman year. So she didn't even know she was going to get one or not. And then a lot of camps. Joe Gillespie from Eden had a great camp at Cortland. And it was 4 weeks, and just for 1 week each. But a lot of college coaches came and coached at the camp, which was a wonderful opportunity for them to scout. As college coaches got smarter, they started running their own camps, which gave them some money for their program. Plus, our kids got to go stay on their campus for a week, be coached by that coach and their players. So as it went on, then once club just became crazy, and there were so many club tournaments, that's when the college coaches turned from, I don't really want to talk to the high school coaches anymore. I want to talk to club coaches because it was such a step up from high school. And I look back at some of the, I remember going to recruit for UB, and the first time I went, I had a Palm Pilot, and they would click the information into the Palm Pilot. Then, because at first they only had like stacks of paper. Oh, I want to see this girl, and 10 minutes later you could find it someplace. But the Palm Pilot came through. Then we started, increased technology. I could type in and say, I want a 5'10" outside hitter from Chicago whose father works for Exxon. I mean, it was crazy. The technology changed it so much. I still had the kids write and call coaches, because coaches would always say, I like the gumption of a kid who's, advocating for themselves. A lot of times the new thing was to hire somebody for $500 and they'd make a tape for you and they'd, send your resume out. And a lot of colleges didn't even look at them because that didn't show how kids could self-advocate for themselves. So we always made scouting tapes. I felt that was my final duty to my seniors, other than to go watch them play in a college match. And it was a lot of work making those tapes.
Well, those were, like you said, Super 8, VHS.
Yeah.
This was pre-digital age.
Yes,
so yeah,
big time. It was hard, and we thought, we'd try and show all their skills, and then we'd edit and take all the good parts out of their game. Well, then all of a sudden they were like, just send us a game. We want to see their overall game. And it was just such an interesting process.
It had to be one that you were learning along with the girls, right?
Definitely.
As you were like, and it's changed. Now it's insane, but changed so much. So
Yes.
What was it like when you were starting out, and how did you learn to help them?
One of the biggest things I learned was to network. And I try to coach at a camp every year of some good college coach that I could learn from, bring back things for my kids, and just learn the things I should be doing. And so at the camps, they always taught us different ways to communicate with them, what kids should be doing, the tapes we had to make, just how to be more, saleable. Yeah.
Well, then you eventually go on the other side of that equation. So tell me about the decision to leave Coaching Sweet Home and go to Daemen.
I had quit coaching at Sweet Home. I was still teaching. Kathy Rich Nealon, who played at USC, came back to Sweet Home. And, there was just something about the way I felt being with her. And I felt the kids, she was me 20 years ago. I felt the kids needed me 20 years ago. She was running to practice, I was walking. And that's what they deserved. So I just said, would you take over the program? And my dad was very ill at the time, and I thought it was perfect. Just stop coaching, let her take the program over. My dad eventually passed away, and so for a whole year I didn't coach. It was unusual, but I needed that time. And then I had 3 or 4 kids at Daemen playing, and they came to see me and said, listen, the coach quit, we need another coach. And I said, yeah. They said, would you come to Daemen? And I just went, interview. They opened it up. So I went, interviewed reluctantly, and because I just didn't know if I still wanted to coach. And I got the position. I loved Daemen. It was just a level up from high school, but nothing over my head. It was still a challenge. I recruited from Western New York so I could really learn about the kids from coaches. It was a great experience for me, and I think for the kids too. I love Daemen, and it was hard for me to leave there. The athletic director from UB called me and said, listen, we just let go our coach. Would you just do spring season for us? And I went, I really don't want to leave Daemen. And then I thought, well, maybe in a way it was a way for me to let go and then not coach anymore. Well, I got to UB, and I knew 3 of the kids. They had been cheetahs. And I said, so what's the story? You guys haven't won in 5 years. And they said, I hate volleyball now. I said, what? And they said, yeah. And so I thought, okay, I got to get them to love volleyball again. I think I can do that. I don't know if I can coach at this level, but I had 2 assistants. So they could pick up my slack, which was blocking, some defense, because it's quite a step up, you know. Mm-hmm. So I stayed there for a couple of years. We finally won a match my first year, and it was like, where's my ribbon? We won. We're done, you know. Next year we won 5, and I could see the kids were doing well. My granddaughter was born and came to live with us, and that was my decision, was to be with her.
Through that time, what did you notice about the level of talent for girls basketball? You mentioned even like with the cheetahs, and the cheetahs became elite. So what did you notice about the interest, the talent pool that around girls volleyball in Western New York?
There were definitely strong programs like Eden. You know, we love, in fact, their boys team was very good, and our boys team were good. So they used to call us Sweden. Eden, yeah, okay, I thought it was kind of cute. Anyways, but it just got so much better. And I really feel it was the kids who played club. And some of them really started just playing 1 or 2 sports. And a lot of my kids did that. They'd play volleyball and softball. They're pretty close. But I wasn't happy they weren't playing, because I knew what it meant to me to play more sports. So I tried to make like cheetah on a Sunday so they could play everything else. There was always controversies, but we did our best. But the level of play really started going up. You know, more and more kids were getting scholarships, which seemed to be what the goal for everyone. And really what I wanted, the goal for my kids was, if they wanted to play in college, I'll find the school for you. Even if you sit my bench, we will find the school for you. Because just like high schools, colleges had lots of different levels too.
Yes. And then it sounds like you liked when your kids would play other sports. Did you like that they were multi-sport athletes? What did you like about that?
I could see some of the volleyball rubbing off on them. I remember my setter played shortstop, and she dove for a ball, where I think if she had just been a regular player, she just would have moved for it. And it's funny because some of the coaches thought I was coming and spying on the kids, making sure they didn't get hurt. I just love to see the comparison of the 2 sports. It was great. And I love basketball. A lot of my kids didn't play basketball, but a lot of them played softball. So that was really fun.
Uh-huh. And so it sounds like you would like to see, I feel like we've gotten away from multi-sport athletes.
Yes, we have.
I think that it sounds like a lot of people that I talk to feel like there's a benefit to being a multi-sport athlete.
I think there is. You probably won't convince the parents of it because they want that scholarship. I love it. I have a girl that played at Cuba Rushford that played volleyball and basketball, which is really hard to do in college because it's overlaps. After she did it 1 year, she said it was too much for her. Mm-hmm. So, but I love that she tried it. She had a love for basketball too. I think in high school, if you're going to play club, it's tough not to be a 1-sport athlete.
Yeah. What does Title IX mean to you?
Title IX, well, I kind of look at it as countable opportunities because that's the way it was explained to me. And I didn't quite understand it until I was at UB and they started a crew team. And I thought, really? Why don't you add, something more popular? And they had more countable opportunities. They had to compare it to football. It was supposed to be volleyball and football, men's and women's basketball, and baseball and women's softball. We didn't have enough people on our team. And so they were going to have to add another girl sport or 2. So instead they added crew because they could put a lot of people on it. But to me, Title IX, it was like a feminine sport renaissance. And I don't mean like a rebirth or a renewal. I mean like as an awakening. What was wrong with us before? You know, like I said, when I was a little girl, why didn't I say, I want to play? Instead, I was the back girl and cheered the boys on. Oh, my gosh. So to me, it's a complete awakening. And thank goodness it passed.
Yes. Do you have a memory to share? I mean, I can't ask you for a favorite memory. I mean, that would be impossible.
Right.
But do you have like, or something that when you think about your time, particularly at Sweet Home, but it could be anywhere, that really kind of comes to mind?
I think as a coach, my biggest opportunity was coaching the All-American team at the NCAAs. It was like Empire Games, but the whole country. Mm-hmm. I was scared. I was coaching kids going to Stanford, going to Nebraska. Here I am, a high school coach, and they were high school All-Americans, but I knew where they were going. So that was a great experience. That was a great challenge for me. But it's funny. One thing that's really, it came up this year. I've been helping Cuba Rushford a little bit when at practice and everything. And, when I moved on to Cuba, I didn't want the notoriety to follow me. I just wanted to be a normal person, even though I liked it before. Hate to admit it. But the student council, gave me a coaching athletic award. And, I helped the program, and I think it's gotten better, but it was amazing how heartwarming that was for me, because we've received so many awards, but it was like from what you see on the paper. People are voting for those. They don't know me. And here the kids at Cuba gave me an award for what I've done and what I've done for Cuba. It's the best award I've ever gotten, was from kids.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to take you back that just reminded me of one question. I just kind of want to go back to when you were first started coaching volleyball at Sweet Home, and you said the kids kind of knew more than you did, right?
Yes.
How was that relationship like? Because I can imagine if you're a player and you're like, I know more than my coach.
I know.
So what was like that those early years, that dynamic like?
I was lucky because I'd had these kids at middle school. Mm-hmm. They knew me from middle school volleyball, from being their gym teacher, and we had a great relationship. But I was still afraid, because I'm not a virile person at all, but I was really afraid that, what was I just going to do, hand out volleyballs? I didn't know what I was doing. And these kids were really good, and they helped me so much. They wanted to succeed. They wanted me to succeed because they liked me. So it was good. I could see how it could have been horrible, though.
But it wasn't. And
it
there's
wasn't.
292 wins
right.
in there.
And it's all about relationships. Giving kids things they don't get. Appreciating them. Understanding their problems. So I don't know. It was just... But I go back a little bit and think about how I didn't know how I should have been more of a self-advocate for girls' sports when I was young. I was in the 70s when I should have been. But I came here on Sports and Women's Day to St. Bonaventure. I was the guest speaker. And I brought my first uniform. And they all laughed. And I asked them a question. I said, what would you do if there was no place for you to play? And one little girl raised her hand. She goes, why? And I thought, wow, that is unbelievable. I kind of wanted her to know about the fight we went through, but I also thought, okay, Title IX won. They think it's weird that girls couldn't play someplace. And I thought, Title IX's come through for us.
That is a great way to look at it, right?
Yeah, I really didn't want to tell her about the fight, I wanted her to think, what are you, crazy?
But we should always have it this way.
Exactly.
And then so kind of dovetails nicely into this last question here. What would you want the younger generations to know about the history of girls and women in sport in Western New York?
I think it's an interesting trip, an interesting process. I don't know how interested they'd be in it. I think like this little girl was in shock when I told her I had no place to play. I was a back girl. The kids were all like muttering and talking about it. I think it's a story that has to be known. I think it's important not to go too deep into it because kids don't listen very well anymore. but I think it's really an important process to know about.
Mm-hmm. When you say that you fought, were there things that you were pretty vocal about?
Yeah.
Even if you had that support at Sweet Home?
Yeah. We went from the girls' gym and the boys' gym to the front gym and the back gym. After Bob retired, we had different athletic directors, and volleyball was the only girls' sport that didn't have a modified team. Everyone else had one. And I went to my superintendent and said, why? And he goes, the athletic director said, you don't need one. And I said, why? He goes, because you win all the time and you don't need a feeder program. I said, well, eventually everyone else is having a modified team, and that will not help our skill level and our progression. And he goes, well, you'll have to convince your athletic director. So he wouldn't go for it. So I did something I don't know if I'm proud of or not. I quit. I needed a shock. And it was a shock. It made the papers again. Everybody goes, oh, you're just trying to get in the papers again, and everything. And it wasn't it at all. I didn't want to coach a program that my school I loved wasn't going to be 100% supportive of. Oh, my gosh. It went to the Board of Education, and boom. We had a modified team, and superintendent asked me to come back. That was the biggest one.
That was the biggest one.
Well,
it was... having to do that to do what's best for the program,
right.
The kids there, and long-term health of the program too.
Yeah. A lot of people thought I was being a baby and a crybaby and everything. And I was just fighting.
Well, and that's what a lot of, unfortunately still today, women who are fighting for something, it's
yes.
easy. Oh, you're just grandstanding.
Yeah.
Oh, you're being a crybaby, right?
Exactly.
When you're just taking that stand.
I agree.
Sally, this has been so great.
Oh, thank you for letting me reminisce.
I loved it. Thank you so much.